Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the class. I want to go, that's not what we want on there. Stop it. Want to go back with just to kind of go over what we do with Chapter 1. Most of that stuff is for your information, but you need to skim over a lot of the stuff that I put in highlights just to make sure that you know that stuff, just in case it's on your test. And with that, we'll move on to Chapter 2 here. We're looking section 2 in your book. It's the driving safely section. First question we want to ask is, why do we inspect a truck? Safety, of course, most important for completing a vehicle inspection. Times that you need to do your inspections, you have right here at 212, pre-trip, during a trip, and after a trip. So those are the three things that you need to know. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and highlight this right here right now because this is important enough to know. Could be part of a question on your test. So those are the three places we do our inspections. Now, what do we look for during those inspections? Tire problems to start with. I'm going to name off some of the stuff in bold, and then what you need to do is go through and make sure that you know what kind of tire problems we're looking for. Wheels and rims, we're always looking for issues with wheels and rims. If you got a problem with those, you've got a pretty big problem. Bad brake drums or shoes. Always a good idea to know what your brake drums and shoes look like before you go driving down the road. Steering system defects. Below this right here, make sure you know all the parts in this diagram. If they ask you a question about anything that's in this diagram, you want to make sure that you know that part of the diagram, say, is a drag link, a tie rod, a steering ring knuckle, anything like that. I don't believe they get all that specific on that, but it's still important to know a lot of this stuff so you can diagnose what may be wrong with the steering if you have a steering issue. Suspension defects. Now you'll see some more diagrams here coming up next. Several different types of suspension. You've got basically your spring suspension. This is generally what you'll find on the front axle. This would be a rear axle suspension setup. Also, you need to know all the parts on here. This is air suspension, whereas it's different than spring suspension. You've got front axle, rear axle. But this is where a rear tandem axle would have air ride on the back and what's different about it. So this is very important to know this as well. Emergency equipment, that goes with your pre-trip as well. You always have to know these three things are the main things for emergency equipment that you have on your truck. Now your CDL pre-trip vehicle inspection test, again, this is highlighted. This is what you'll be tested on when you do your skills and skills test at the DMV once you're done with the class. However, there could be some questions on it to get your permit as well. They're just not going to be quite as in-depth. So here's your guide to check your vehicle, to inspect it. We're looking at vehicle overview. As you walk up to it, you want to look everything around it. Always everything around it. Sometimes you can find more problems with that just as you're walking up to it than what you can if you're actually going through it with a fine-tooth comb. So then you want to check your engine compartment. All these things have to do with that. This is pretty important. This is what the Illinois folks want to see. If you check your fan belts, this is the amount of play they want in it, 1/4 of an inch, and that's it. So that could be something that you could see on a test. Start engine, inspect inside of the cab. Again, what we're looking for mostly is the stuff that I have highlighted here. That's generally what we go with when we try to take our test. So you're looking at all the gauges inside the truck. Here's an example of one, how the oil pressure should work. This is very subjective. The oil pressure might be different and could be different in any vehicle that you drive. So basically what you need to do is get to know your vehicle. Make sure if it's doing anything out of the ordinary, like if it stays at 0, shut it off. If it goes to 100, shut it off. Ask somebody who does know it. All right, so then we're checking emergency equipment. The 3 things that we went over before, which is electrical fuses, red reflective triangles, and properly charged and rated fire extinguisher. Optional items can be any of these below, along with phone numbers and an accident reporting kit. Of course, you're always going to check your safety belt. You want to make sure that it's not torn or frayed, and it does latch properly. All this is pretty much, you're always going to check your lights when you take off. You're going to perform a walk-around inspection, which is going to be above and beyond your walk up to, as I said in the beginning. And these are all the things you're going to check. And again, just because it's not highlighted does not mean that you shouldn't read it. You need to read the whole book. But as far as what we do, and what questions that we need to answer and we consider to be the most important to get you past this test, what we have highlighted is usually what you need the most for that test, but you need to familiarize yourself with everything. Okay, so as we get down here, we've gone through checking all of our stuff, left side batteries, all this stuff you can see. Signal lights. Then you get down here, start the engine and check. You want to check for hydraulic leaks. That's in the brakes. We're taking air brakes, but you might have to answer questions about both, whether it be hydraulic or air. Your braking system. Of course, you're going to want to check that to make sure that it is working correctly before you move the truck in any way. This is very important right here. This is how you test your service brake stopping action and how you test your parking brakes. Moving down, let's see here. You always want to, anytime you stop, you want to do some short inspections during your trip. And then there's finally the safety inspection. Drivers of trucks and tractors transporting cargo must inspect the securement of the cargo within the first 50 miles of a trip and every 150 miles to every 3 hours, whichever comes first after that. All right, so what this is your test your knowledge section. This is when you go through, you can answer these questions. If you cannot answer these questions, you need to find the part of the chapter or section that this question is in and go over it. And until you can answer that question without looking, don't go on. But that's why they put these here, so you can review and you can know the answer to these questions. So, for example, question number 1, what is the most important reason for doing a vehicle inspection? Safety. That's the most important reason. There may be lots of reasons, but safety comes down to everything. So you need to ask yourself all these questions, try to answer them without looking, and then move on from there. All right, we're going to end this one right here, and we'll start out with 2.2 in the next video so we don't go on too long-winded. Give you a chance to go back through and read this stuff. Do it a subsection at a time. That way you're not overwhelmed. You can kind of keep up. And I'll see you back here in the next video.